Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, September 24th, and this is session B of the BCDC Design Subcommittee. The Planning Department continues hosting public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. I am Christina Rico, Executive Director of the Boston Civic Design Commission and Senior Urban Designer at the City of Boston Planning Department. Before we proceed with the agenda, the open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that Commission staff are making an audio and video recording of this meeting. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. For the purposes of the record, we are joined this evening by Commissioners Evans, Kim, Kotaridis, and Ron. And I believe we might be expecting Commissioners Love and Solano to join us later this evening. Tonight's agenda will include a presentation. I'm sorry, this slide is incorrect. We'll include a presentation for actually 2 Harbor Street, South Boston Innovation Campus, Building 2. Tonight's meeting proceedings will follow the typical BCDC Design Subcommittee format, beginning with a brief presentation from the proponent, comments from the BCDC commissioners, and followed by public testimony. Just give me one moment, please, while I work to promote the folks who will be giving you the presentation for 2 Harbor Street this evening. I have on my list here, Harry. You should be able to unmute yourself. Blake.
Good afternoon, all.
Natasha. Hi, Harry. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Sorry, I'm the only person running the meeting right now, so I'm just by hand.
Hi, good evening.
You all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Okay, I believe I have all members of the proponent team here promoted to co-host. Is there anybody that needs permission to speak or present who doesn't currently have it?
I think we're all good from our side.
Okay, so you guys can go ahead and take over screen sharing.
Okay, I will grab the screen. Thank you.
I'll get us started, Harry. And I'm Eric Ewer with Beacon Capital. And it's been a little while since we've been in front of you, but we're very pleased to be back in front of you. And I promise we didn't take the summer off. We've been very busy. And we listened very carefully to the comments you gave us after our first meeting, and it took a little while to digest them. And I think most importantly, we took your comments to our landlord edict. And when we had the meeting to talk about keeping the driveway elevated past building 1, past the entrance of building 2, for the various reasons the team will go through based on your comments, everything started that coupled with real tenant feedback from the first action we've seen in quite a while. And that was early summer, late spring, early summer. And then the feedback also from our investors and their approvals to move forward was kind of the what was added all together to get the result right here that we're going to present to you. So happy to be back here. I'm going to turn it over to Eric number 2, Eric Potkin, also here with Beacon, and he'll lead it to the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. So as Eric, you mentioned, it's been a little while since we've been in front of BCDC. So just a quick refresher, where we kind of sit on that left map in the larger context of the Seaport area and the Marine Park. And then you can see 2 Harbor Building 1, that's the building that we just recently completed construction on this past summer. 2 Harbor Building 2, that's the building that we're discussing tonight. And then just really high level stats, a little over 300,000 square feet of lab and office, 10 levels. There will be shared parking beneath the two buildings. So existing garage under the building 1 will be connected to the building 2 garage underneath. They'll share one common entrance along a common shared service court. And then as far as sustainability, obviously all the new 10th edition codes, the stretch codes will be guiding our sustainability and the overall building design. And then of course, a big focus on the resiliency of this building. And like Eric mentioned, a lot of work that we've done over the past couple months with the grading and kind of getting everything up to a good flood resistant elevation as well. So with that context, I'll turn it over to our design team from Handel to start walking through some of the details.
Good evening, commissioners. It's Blake Middleton. How are you all? I think we're going to try to summarize. There were a number of comments that we received, in our last meeting with the full commission, and see if we can compress at least to what we also understood, probably the sort of most urgent and salient ones that would affect our thinking about building massing and particularly a connection to the pedestrian realm. And that could be kind of summarized by a couple of things. One, request to sort of understand better the relationship between the two buildings. And another very important one was sort of a number of commissioners asking for clarity about exactly how the entry sequence was going to work in the previous scheme, and then of course what the pedestrian experience was going to be like around the perimeter of the site, but also in particular in terms of the approach to the building. We were asked to sort of understand, or at least to give a little more clarity to our thinking about the relationship of the materiality of our building to the Marine Industrial Park, which we'll address this evening. And as Eric just mentioned, a better understanding of how our building ties into both the requirements for resiliency, and in particular the sort of floor levels around the perimeter of the site and flood protection, and what that impact might be in terms of the sense of public connection of the street level. As we know, we're dealing with this issue in many places in Boston where pedestrian sidewalks and first floors are in different locations and section. Next, please. And to sum up some of the big picture of what we've done here. As Eric has mentioned, the buildings are connected not only below grade, but programmatically, they're also connected on the first and even second level. And this is driven by a kind of significant evolution in the kind of programming and relationship of the buildings and the potential, for creating interdependability, if you will, programmatically, particularly if a single tenant, becomes the sort of driver in what's going on in the inside of the building. At the same time is in strengthening the relationship, the link to the Silver Line across Hall Road through our open space and guiding folks from that direction to the entrance for Building 2 and secondarily to Building 1. And then on terms of materiality, I would say it's sort of dramatic simplification, particularly on this west side of the building and the relationship of these two buildings to each other, which I think is very apparent. And then, as I mentioned before, raising the whole entry level, actually of Building 2, which was down 4 feet and required all sorts of interior steps and stairs and other things going on at the corner of Building 1. I remember Commissioner Ron had, pointed out a number of concerns about what was going on there. So I think we've made a dramatic sort of simplification and clarification about the relationship between the two buildings. Next, please. In that regard, I think this can be kind of summarized in this diagram here. There were questions at the time about the idea of this sort of shield and balconies and whether, overlooking the entry point and whether that made sense in terms of, how one would sort of orient themselves towards the main entrance of the building, and also even the building massing. And so what we've done is kind of reduce the number of perimeter moves and sculpting of the building and simplifying the shape of the building. We've also reduced the overall footprint of the building by 8 feet. And so that has opened up significant amount of space between Building 1 and Building 2, and I think helps heighten the distinction between them and allow them to be independent buildings, but still tethered, together at the ground level. Next, please. And so we can see that somewhat in this picture here. And the idea is really just by making a very simple big carve, if you will, into the texture of the grillage, if you will, of the facade of building 2, and making that big 2-story cut, which sort of opens itself back out towards building 1 and draws the eye towards the sort of center of the joint, and the entry door then located under a continuous canopy. So the motif and the architectural language of what's already been established in building 1 essentially turns the corner and continues in this new joint between the indoor and outdoor space between these two. Next, please. And then it's a little hard to tell from this perspective angle, but you have to trust us that, in fact, the buildings are further apart from each other. But I think this helps show the difference, and I would say positive simplification of what's going on between the two. We have a very big, bold, simple trabeated facade in building 1, and we wanted to restore that level of simplicity, if you will, to the building massing on this side of the building on building 2, and let those two buildings both work within that kind of framework. Next, please. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mark Klopfer.
Thanks, Blake. Hello, everybody. This is a drawing that we used a lot in the phase 1 project. It shows retail or sort of enlivened ground floor edges as they relate to Northern Avenue, and then making your way across Hall Road into the Ray Flynn Marine Park. And the landscape out in front of the phase 1 building really becomes a sort of gateway moment. So we're reviving this diagram because we think it's really important to the urban design of this parcel. And here you can see that the 2 Harbor Building 2 piece is really adding to that. So these are, the blue lines are showing these sort of major pedestrian connections. One is coming from the new T station, which is going to be at parcel H as that's finished, and then the pedestrian flows coming down Northern Avenue and then continuing into the Marine Park. And the next one. So this is the site plan. We have a couple of actual photographs of the phase 1 building now. So this is what it looks like currently. We have the temporary landscape, and it's the forecourt for building 1. That's the photograph at the top is photograph number 1. You can see images 2 and 3 are taken alongside the building. And so here we're looking at the ground floor of both of them and how those connections that Blake was just talking about have merged. He mentioned that there's a grade change that happened. This is really a game changer for the landscape of the project. So as it exists now, building 1 has a ramp that goes down to the street level right as it leaves the parcel. And so EDIC has allowed a change of that driveway to be lifted so that now it's ramping in front of the new building 2. And that very much removes all kinds of complications we had in the landscape of having accessible entrance from that lower elevation. So now both lobbies are raised up to this resilient height of elevation 20.5.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
It's Bill. Can you just repeat the last 4 sentences describing this? I was having trouble following your explanation.
Sure. And maybe
Harry, go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Or go to the next slide even.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So on this slide, we have some spot elevations. So the way that the resilience strategy for this project works in phase 1, Northern Avenue is at 16.5, and the driveway comes up to the door at 20.5. And the landscape itself from the Hall Road Northern intersection starts at 16 also and tapers up to that same 20.5. So the driveway then continues at 20, all the way till it leaves our parcel. The new entrance there, the doorway, the lobby entrance to building 2 is located. Harry, if you want to show where that is located. There's one lay-by space in front of that door. And right after you leave the parcel, you're then ramping down to the existing grade of 16.5 at Channel Street. So before, we were actually ramping down on our parcel to leave the parcel at 16.5. And so that caused all kinds of ramping to happen. So in this scheme, we've taken care of that with the driveway so that both lobbies of the phase 1 building and the phase 2 building are all at the same elevation of 20.5. And then after you leave the lobby for the building 2 and head toward Channel Street, you're sloping back down to existing grade at 16.65 when it hits Channel Street. There's also a proposed crosswalk across Hall Road, which is part of the phase 1 construction. You can see it in the site plan here. That connection is basically at 17.4, and it also is ramping up from that corner to meet the lobby elevation at 20.5. So the site immediately adjacent there is parcel U, which is a future development site. So the landscape here is mostly the streetscape around the building, and we go ahead to the next one. It's fine, Harry. And we are delighted to have the second floor green roof that's connecting building 1 and building 2 over the building lobby entrance. And I think I put it to Natasha at this point.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, good evening, everyone. So one of the things that we did was connect, as Mark said, connect the 2 buildings, connect the 2 lobbies. And so the middle entrance is the main entrance to building 2. Here on the left, you see a door that's been relocated from the side for the bikes to come into building 1. And then there's another entrance on the right-hand side at the end of the glass curtain wall for building 2. And we'll show it to you in plan in a second. But the idea is that we would push that entrance back a little bit to create a space that has connection on both levels, on the first level and on the second level. And with that as terrace on the second level, as Mark mentioned. So maybe we should go to the next one to be able to see the difference between where we were before and where we are now. So the before one, we had a kind of a corner entrance. The buildings did not connect. We needed to understand, and some of the comments that we got from you is, where's the main entry? We need to understand how the project facilitates connectivity, and what is the building's approach to resiliency and flood protection, because we were coming into the first floor. On the right-hand side is the current design, so relocating the main entry to be between the 2 buildings, and the 2 levels to be at the same location at 4 feet above grade level, and then raise the internal driveway to that same level at the main entry of the building. And so then here is a resiliency strategy. We're on the left-hand side, the previously proposed. So what you see at this pink corner, and maybe Harry, you can point to that, that was the old lobby. So the entire floor would be at 4 feet plus 4, but the lobby was at 0. And then in the back, there's the blue additional protection for the critical infrastructure. And the pink in the middle of that site is the protected area below resiliency, which is the loading docks. Now, the current design brings the new lobby, the entire first floor is all at +4. The loading dock is still at grade level, but the additional protection for critical infrastructure is still at +5. And then the next slide shows, on the left-hand side is the entire campus plan. On the right-hand side is the blow up of the new lobby. So on the left-hand side, we can see the lobby for building 1, the lobby for building 2, as they connect, kind of in the center, in that central core where you have the entrance, as Mark had mentioned. And then if you go to the blow up on the right-hand side, you see the entrance, the large arrow, red arrow is the entrance to the vestibule, with right in front of you would be the main front desk. And then on the bottom part is the cafe. There is the security area that leads you to the elevators. Right behind it is also a connecting stair to the upper level. But we have this great opportunity to have all of the lounge spaces against the curtain wall, against the street. And then at the bottom of the plan is the entrance to the bike room for building 2. On the upper side, you see the entrance to the bike room for building 1. And so, and then the tenant space in the bottom. So here is the second level, and you can see here on the left-hand side, the kind of peach color is the tenant space. And on the campus plan, you can see that we have a terrace already on building 1 that's built, and there would be a new terrace at the connector piece. The area in building 1 has amenity spaces that are wellness. So it's the gym, the yoga room, a conference. There would be additional conference center right there, the conference center. And then there would be a connection to building 2 where there would be the communicating stair that's within the security area. And then there would be a lounge space and then opportunity for different types of wellness areas, including maker spaces. It could be tech-free zones, recreation in building 2. So it would complement building 1, and then there would be the terrace area where all of these spaces could connect, especially during the nicer months, and open up and become a larger space to activate the street. And then the next plan is kind of a view of it, looking at Harbor Streets, and I'm going to hand it back over to our team.
So one of the things about Harbor Street is we have a really robust streetscape on phase 1, and we're continuing that into phase 2 as well. There was some reconstruction of the road as part of the phase 1 construction there. And the next one. And this is the view on Channel Street. So this was also a street that was very much reconfigured in the phase 1 process. Even though the building doesn't sit that close to this edge, it was part of the construction that we did. This had really been an alley previously. We've constructed it as a proper street with a curb and a sidewalk. And in this phase, we're going to be adding street trees to that so that it really becomes sort of a proper city street. And it's no longer, it used to just be a fire lane, actually.
So I'm seeing a time check and I'm acutely aware of that. So I'm going to move real quick. The issue of materiality was brought up in the first meeting. It's just a reminder of the sort of inspiration that led to the design of Building 1, the Marine Industrial Park, literally industrial, and certainly marine, and the sort of use of robust materials and trabeated frames and all of that language that is endemic to the context is fueling our thinking about the materiality of the building next. And so also with the kind of tie-in, there was some discussion about the relationship of the building massing and architectural expression of the let's say the sort of the frame expression. And what's interesting is that from the right to the left, Building 1, our site, kind of a single story expression, if you will. And then each of these buildings tend to be super simple in their formatting, and they tend to either sort of orient themselves vertically or horizontally. And to some degree, what we're doing is allowing that sort of shear between the two come together on the expression of the frame system that we've applied the plaster system onto Building 2 next. And then we can see here that goal here is that this will be a kind of a much deeper and darker tone, not trying to replicate what we've already done in Building 1, but still building off this sort of very elemental materials that also shimmer in different ways in the light as the surfaces are torqued one way or the other. Next. Facades. I'm just going to scroll through those, Harry, if you don't mind. West. This is, and then this is on the Harbor Street side. And then the last one I think is, oh, I'm sorry, this is our Harbor Street side. Next. And then, yeah, I'm going to end right there because I know you guys are eager to give us some hopefully helpful guidance on next steps. Thank you.
Thanks,
Great.
Blake and team.
Sorry,
Commissioners.
I was gonna say, sorry, Mimi, in my haste to try to get everyone on board and stuff, I didn't do the usual thing where I share that this is the first subcommittee meeting prior to a previous introduction, I believe in the April monthly meeting for this project. So please proceed. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, and that's great. I had technical difficulties, so I joined late. So anyway, I saw all of the presentation though, but Bill.
If someone wants to go ahead of me, by the way, please do.
You have your hand raised,
Okay.
so
Okay.
everyone's being shy.
No, let me just, I think I look at the two buildings and I find the elevations to be incredibly elegant. There still seems to be a relationship. I know Blake or maybe Mark, you talked about the expression of the frame system where they come together or something, the relationship. being so different, but in many ways, I find the relations quite supporting each other in a very strong way. So I find the solution for the mass of the building to be really very positive.
Mm.
The only piece that, and I also appreciated when you came back and explained the ground plane a little more clearly, and the ground plane seems quite nice too. The only part that feels not up to the strength, and I find these two buildings very strong and in a very positive way. The only thing that doesn't feel quite as strong, and it's inevitable when you use a glass connector, is the kind of main front door that it doesn't feel like it's strong enough in the face of the really elegant two boxes. And so I turned to Blake and Mark, and you know, I guess my question would be, what other kind of solutions did you envision, and why did you shy away from them? And I know that's a kind of odd question, but it's not as strong. It feels like it needs that bit of graphics, the letters for Harbor to tell you where to go.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish there was a way that front door could be stronger, and I don't know whether it means more solid or more transparent or what. So
I think if I may just quickly respond, because I know other commissioners may have other viewpoints on the same topic, but I think that is an area definitely that could be enhanced. There's enough glazing, surrounding our sort of, linear extension of the lobby, reaching back out to the street, back out to the green open space that there could actually be some visual, I'll call it sort of compression, flanking that entry box. At the moment, Bill, it's essentially a duplicate of the same entry vestibule that's happening on building 1. Part of that was maybe a default, just going to the sort of language of what's going on here. But my quick response is I could imagine this evolving into something a little more robust because we have such a kind of open expanse of natural light coming in on both sides of it. Maybe there's a different way of thinking about that.
I would agree with that kind of take you just laid out, Blake.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But others may disagree. So
Sure.
I'm not seeing any hands, so maybe I'll chime in. I definitely think this is much more clear, stronger idea than the last round. So I think it's definitely moving in the positive direction. I had the only reason I'm chiming in here is I had the exact same thought, Bill, and I'm really torn because I think that green roof certainly adds a nice amenity to the building and a nice, landscape moment, but it's also the thing that's making that reading seem weaker because you have, or at least in my thoughts, if that glass volume, which I believe was a pedestrian bridge the last time, somewhat aligned with the lobby wall and it was more of a two-story reading, would it be stronger? Would that geometry resolve itself a little bit more? I'm not suggesting that that's the solution, but that's something that I think in that connector piece, maybe a couple more rounds of thinking of how that could be strengthened and simplified. It comes to a really tenuous point at the bike room too. I don't know if you want to pull that back, but I mean, kind of nitpicky comments, but I do think it's moving in the right direction. I want to talk about 2 Harbor Street because I mean Harbor Street, which is the backside of this building, I believe.
It's the other front side.
The other front side. that misalignment on that sidewalk, I was just curious if there are other solutions, if we go to a site plan that you all looked at. That just stands out to me where you have a real setback with building 1, but in building 2, it really tightens up and pinches up there. I really think the same thing about Channel Street, but I believe that's a more minor street connection. And so maybe planting a seeds for the landscape architects on the commission to think about that, if there's any suggestions there. But I definitely think it's moving in the right direction.
I just,
Maybe,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to quickly respond to the alignment issue. So it's kind of important to hold on to that square footage of the project. But there's also no alignment, no prior alignment going on Harbor Street. Right now, if you go out there, you'll notice that, 12 channel just to the south, you can just see the outline there. Sets way back. And there's a big sort of kink in the road, and then it does another kind of little sort of funky adjustment as you head even further south. And our thought is that this street can be a little more episodic. There's something at some point in time may completely change right across the street, because right now that's all big, long, open truck dock area, staging area. So who knows what's going to occur there in the future. We tried to take advantage of that condition there and actually create that one band of sort of vertical glazing kind of cut open into the frame, because we see that as an important location for meeting rooms and that sort. And that corner actually, because of the offset, also takes advantage of some wonderful sort of view corridors looking back out to the harbor. But it was a way to also respond to that offset and let that also become kind of a bay window at a key jog.
But Blake, does the ground floor align or does it set back? I can see where the bay window is, and I don't know if it's a trick of the eye, this perspective. I'm just curious along
the ground floor
harbor.
does not align, right? So the planting zone in building 1, which is built, is pretty much in alignment with the face of building 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
But in that perspective, it looked like the base might be, set back from the rest of the building above. And I just don't.
Yeah, early on in the old scheme, actually, there was a whole bunch of complicated cantilevering going on here, and we've eliminated all of that.
I mean, I personally would be an advocate of looking at that streetscape condition again. It's a particular concern I have in the Seaport area, that the urban fabric doesn't have a kind of pedestrian feel to it. So I would encourage the team just to look at that and see if there's a way to manage the alignment that Mimi's talking about. I also think that, I think the last time I saw this project was a while ago, because if my memory serves correct, there was in the landscape like a wall or something. There was a garage there. So it was a long time ago that I saw this. And I do appreciate kind of the landscape planning strategies along Hall Road. I think that makes a lot of sense, Mark, the things that you guys have done. I do have a question about that intersection, the corner of Hall Road and Northern Ave. And I think it might be helpful just to, like, you may have already done this, like a circulation diagram, because when I look at it, there's something about coming across that, those 2 crosswalks and the shapes of those planters, that I just wonder if there's a way in which you could kind of explain to us and maybe study it a little further, how the shapes of the plazas kind of emerge from that kind of entry point. So like I look at one of the ramps kind of close parallel to Hall Road where it says 16, and you come up and you come to the plaza. And I'm a little confused on kind of north, right against that plaza with the planters on Northern Ave, and just wondered if there's an opportunity to kind of take a look at that again, just to see, just to clarify the relationship of the urban edge to the entry pieces to the notion of creating gathering space. There's a kind of equality to some of the plaza spaces. And so, but I think there's just like, I really like Plan South where it says elevation 22, I think, where in the perspective you can see there's a ramp that takes you up and then there's this plaza, and there's something very nice about the relationship of the building to like 2/3 of the site with that canopy structure as well. So I would just ask that to take a look at the kind of urban street edge and this kind of semi-plaza condition at elevation 16 a little bit more.
So what you're seeing is the indeterminacy of where Hall Road is going to go. So what you see are the future traces of how Hall Road, when it becomes aligned north of Northern Avenue, which is a much larger project, we've had to maintain this sort of acute angle that rotates off of from our
Could you point
parcel
to
view.
this stuff as Mark is talking, just because?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically where that ramp is coming from, the 16 spot elevation in the front
Yeah,
plaza
so
there.
north, yeah.
Yeah, that whole sort of flat zone will one day be Hall Road. So we've had to prefigure it so that it makes sense without it if it stays like this forever.
Right.
Or we have it also swinging or rotating so that there's like a piece of pie wedge that's cut out from all of this landscape that still
That's
would
tricky.
work if Hall Road basically came across the tunnel box where the Ted Williams Tunnel enters,
I know
90
this.
enters the tunnel there. Hall Road can rotate. And so what we're left with are these sort of funny spaces, exactly as you described. And that's why, because the traffic islands change, the rotary goes away, the alignment of the Hall Road as it continues out, it's actually Fid Kennedy, is completely changed from what this plan is showing.
Mick Young, it's been 4 years that we've tried to have meetings with Massport, with all our neighbors,
Yeah.
the city, with the bike track of Northern Ave. They've been very helpful, and we've volunteered to be the entity that'll pull everybody together, have design meetings. So we're very anxious to figure out that side of our plaza there, because it is a lot of flat area that we're
Right, but in plan, and I am judging this in plan, it is a lot of irregular shapes. And Mark, I do remember the complexity of this corner. I think what would be great is if you could create like just a quick hand sketch diagram that shows all the constraints and the resulting geometries from those constraints. Because honestly, I don't fully understand it. Like I don't understand why some of the planters are curved, some of them have angular geometries. I'm sure there's logic and why there is that small half moon planter in the corner, because it's pretty flat, right? And a part of me just wonders, do you need all those planters?
They're built.
Oh,
Some of them are built, although not exactly like this.
Oh,
so
okay.
if there was a way also to kind of do as a layer on top of the diagram, what's an existing condition, like what's built?
Yeah.
So it sounds very complicated, but these things make me very sad because I hate that today looks confusing for some possible tomorrow. And so I would just ask that maybe you could just like look at it once more for the city and see if there's a way of making today a little less complex, I guess. In the end, it looks complex. But
And Mick Young, Blake,
Yeah.
let's shoot them we paid VHB to try to gather up as much as the renderings and design information that we've seen. We had a presentation of what everybody thought was going to happen there, and we can show that, Mick Young, because that half moon,
yeah,
I agree, but that gets wiped out by the realignment of Hall Road there. That corner there. That's such an opportunity. But still, even with this drawing, we've sent it out to everybody and saying, hey, we're trying to get everybody to communicate and to agree. Are we really close? And it's been crickets, nothing back. So
Yeah,
but if we don't have it here, we can send that around. It's
that
our
would be so great. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you.
But I do like the way you've graded from Hall Road up in a more gentle way, and you're not creating these urban walls. I think those strategically are really smart, and just the raising of the building to kind of meet the landscape better. I think it's a lot of really strong things in this kind of updated proposal. So thank
Thanks.
you.
The line of trees that comes from the main door, the main entrance to building 1 there is put in temporarily. They're going to be lifted up on a promenade that's shown here. So really the plaza from that line of trees north has somewhat been recreated like this, although that little piece by the +16 is different than that because of the existing circulation that happens between those crosswalks. So we'll have a current aerial next time we present this, so you
That
can
would be
see
so
what the
great. I
temporary
think
condition looks like.
these impactful, important projects, if you have time, it might be nice to zoom out just a little bit so that you can see kind of how everything, and then we can see how the future of Hall Road is kind of strategically to understand it better. But thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Vic Young. Any other commissioners?
I'll say something. Hi. I'm so sorry. I was a few minutes late. I had trouble signing on, but I did hear most of the presentation. So thank you for that. And the solution that's been looked at the front door, I think improves things. But in that improvement, I think that it also reveals other things that need a little more study. And let me grab my trusty pen. Let me pick another color. So as I look at this, I mean, it's tough having a street, right? A road that has to basically hug the building. That's a tough relationship for the building, but it's also for the landscape. And I'm wondering about this section in particular, though I think the same comment could be said to a lesser degree here, which is that's a pretty long distance where you have in section, you have the roadway, and I'm not going to draw curves or anything, but let's just say it's there. And then you have more landscape before you reach a green area. And I'm just wondering about the thickness of that, if this is the building, whether or not there's too much pavement in that cross section, and whether or not there might be some breaking up of that long face with some landscape that is both playing off the roadway as well as the green spaces on the other side of it. I think it's just tough having that road be so long and straight, and maybe the benefit of maybe plants kind of forming one edge of it would be a welcome relief.
So Mark, can you tell us what's happening on the edge of the road? I rode my bike recently around this park, and I know it's there, but is that planting in that tapered area that Laura was referencing? Does that exist?
So I like the idea of drawing at BCDC meetings.
I want to do the same thing.
So right now the driveway is in this alignment, and it comes down and meets grade right here.
Are you drawing, Mark?
Yes.
In pink or
the pink,
magenta.
yes. And it's coming, it's at elevation 16 when it comes here in its current condition. And then all of parcel U is below that. So the big change for us has been that we've been allowed to put a retaining wall here and make this zone of the driveway slope down to 16, rather than right now, the ramp is here. So
So just to be clear, you're saying this is a wall?
I'm not seeing your drawing now. Oh, no, that's a curb.
Okay, I'm sorry, trace that out in a different color if you could, where the
So
wall.
let me draw in this ramp as well. So this is a ramp coming up from Northern
Yep.
Avenue existing.
Yep,
And then we have a curb all the way along it. Now, the new ramp goes down from the elevation 20 to 16 there.
yep,
And then everything along that is a curb. So in its original state, this was going to be a retaining wall right here.
That's right. Yeah.
And so now that we're up at 20, we don't have to have a retaining wall here anymore. So the idea was that we're basically taking this part of the park and it's a bosque, and this part is open with the landform, and this part is the plaza.
yep. That it basically extends out at the same elevation as the front door.
Correct.
And I see that. I think that's a nice move and also a necessary move. But I'm talking about something that's just slightly different, and hoping I can draw it, which is what happens. Oops, I can't draw it. Hold on a second. What happens between the road right here and this edge?
So right now there's just a curb between those two.
Right, and so what I'm trying to explain is that, oh, hang on one second, Mark, I'm sorry. Is that it's this edge that feels much harder than it has to feel. And so rather than having however wide the roadway is and then more pavement, it feels to me like you could insert some planting or green between that path and the roadway. In fact, I'm not really sure why you need that that path in this particular location. Maybe it has to do with bigger circulation, but I want there to be this green that comes across, right? So like this green is here and it kind of makes this space. I want that there too.
I follow you.
Because this feels like a room, and that one could also feel, that area could also feel like a room that relates to the landscape more than it does the roadway itself.
Great. So we can look at that for sure.
Jonathan, I saw that you had your hand raised a minute ago.
Oh, yes. Shifting gears, kind of way back to the exterior. Again, picking up off of Bill's comment, I think the overall massing facade articulation is really handsome and elegant and really exciting. I just have one general question, understanding the sort of rigor of the facade diagram. How does that logic inform any attitude about the mechanical screening, which is also a pretty prominent part of the facade? Just, is there any thought of actually bringing that same language up and sort of having that sort of frame actually become the language of the mechanical screen?
Well, I the answer is yes, and it is. I think, if I understood your question correctly, and if I
I am
didn't,
looking at
I
the building,
apologize.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're intentionally, there's some drivers here that are important to understand. We actually needed to, in simplifying the building massing and not duplicating the, let's call it the attic story motif.
Right.
And there's plenty of precedent around town for that kind of thing. We are also maximizing and capturing as much of roof area as possible. We have some very serious electrification, future-proofing for full electrification requirements in the code. And this allows us to capture all the available area up there. But yeah, the idea is that the lattice, if you will, is basically from ground to roof line. Some of those, most of that will be spandrel glass, but some of it will also be louvers, mostly on the south side where the enclosed mechanical space is. I think we showed that in our elevation drawings that we submitted.
Got it.
Yeah, does
Yeah,
that
forget about
answer your
the building
question?
one.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, it does. I was looking at building one where
Oh, I
it's
see. Yeah. And that
it's
was a whole different concept of interlocking volumes and uh, different, less constraints than we have on site of building two.
got it. And maybe just to sort of circle back to the comments from Bill and Amy earlier, I would probably agree that that sort of glass knuckle is an opportunity for a little bit more iteration. And yeah, it's funny. I mean, I feel like you could perhaps consider a two-story expression of that glass, but then you would lose the that sort of step back terrace.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that depth of that overhang is probably could be reconsidered to be less steep, to actually pull that glass up a little bit more, just to kind of make that a little more prominent. But overall, again, I think there's a lot to like about the architecture here.
Yeah, it just in quick response, because I think, Bill may have brought this up also. We looked at the idea of the classic, link between building one, building two, and then a little object in between. And uh, that seemed to create some interior artificial conditions that weren't making much sense. And in fact, the sort of relationship between the existing building and the new building became a little fraught with that. I would call it classic solution, but there was no need for a large interior two-story volume in there. And it was really important to try to create this green overlook and extend as much as possible the sense of sort of natural vegetation around the perimeter site. We have no control over what happens directly opposite us on parcel U. As Mark mentioned, it's a future development site. There was some submission for that, but I don't know if it's gone forward through BCDC yet. And so, we're trying to make the most out of this and create that characteristic, that ambiance for a life sciences office building of this nature.
Yeah, Blake, and I just wanted to add, we were trying to simplify from the last meeting. We had it at the corner, as Blake mentioned. We were trying to simplify, make sure that both the buildings felt elegant and that the connection was well defined, but also, as Blake mentioned, not to distract, or be more positive towards a future parcel U and integrate it into the larger context. And so that was, I think, our goal and mission based on your comments. And based on better urban design.
Got it.
Any other comments? Christina, maybe we'll see if there's any public testimony and we can come back to a conversation here.
Happy to. At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press the number 9 on your dial pad to activate the raised hand function, and dial 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I think the only hand raised here is Bill Ron. And I think I'm seeing that in the attendance, it's just staff and proponent teams. So I'll consider the comment period closed.
Okay, all right. Well, we have to make a decision. I think there was comments around 3 particular areas, possibly 4. One is thinking about the resolution of this entry, but the general, approach seems right. I don't know if it's fussing with the geometry, or we'll let you think about what the right solution is. I think we talked about the other front as it was referenced in terms of the street alignment? Is there something that you could do there? Laura mentioned the some landscape ideas along this long continuous road. I think these comments are manageable, but I just want to know from the commissioners, are we ready to take this to full commission? Would you like to see this project again, some of these revisions in subcommittee again?
Well, in regard to my first comment, I'm certainly happy for this to go to commission. I think that the planning department and can deal with any of those issues perfectly fine. And in fact, I think the building's so good that I wouldn't want to slow it down. As to the others, I leave that to the commissioners who brought those forward.
I would agree. It's ready to go back to the full commission.
All right. Well, I think hopefully we gave you clear direction on the minor, adjustments that we're looking for. We didn't talk about materiality, and so I think the one thing, Blake, that I'll just mention that you said you were imagining a slightly darker color of metal panel. It looks almost equal in tone. I kind of like the idea of it being slightly darker, but that's, for you to consider. And
Think of it as the polished penny versus the well-worn penny.
I was going to say, Blake, your penny thing, didn't it?
This, I don't think we want to detract from the sort of strength of what's happening in building one, and in fact find a way to complement it. And I hope that explains some of the thinking behind that, Mimi.
Yeah, no, and I think that's my thought too. I just wonder if the penny was a little bit more patina, would it highlight building one a little bit better?
Sure. I think that's a fair assessment. The devil's in the detail, and ultimately the finishes of that, the metal and the glass. Yeah.
It does feel to me, Mimi, that the biggest comment that needs to be addressed when it goes to full commission is the joint between the two buildings and the entrance. It seems like that was of most concern and would require a little bit more design work. So should we give a little guidance, Mimi, on what the expectations are for that, or are we going to put this back on BPDA to help resolve?
I feel like we've given enough commentary for them to work with, the planning department to resolve some of these issues. And if the planning department feels they have, met the ask, they will schedule them. I don't know that there's anything specific I think that they need to do. But if any others agree or disagree.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's the sort of natural next step in the continued evolution of this project. And again, I think given the leaps we've seen from where we were initially to where we are now, I kind of have confidence that they'll meet the bar. So yeah, I think we give enough opportunity for them to sort of dig into that.
It feels
direction for them to dig into that.
So we don't vote, right, Mimi?
No.
We're just
So I think
saying this is going to go to the next.
We're recommending that the proponent comes back to full commission after they work through some of these details with the planning department. So, and I think with that, Christina has everything she needs.
I do indeed. I think we set a land speed record. It's
I know.
6:10.
I
I
know.
hope everybody enjoys the last little 15 minutes of sunshine we have here before the sun starts to set earlier every day.
Laura, were you going to say something? I think I might have interrupted you.
Just very quickly about the glass box. I think that is a great solution to think about joining them, but both of the buildings are pretty, they're pretty developed, and the glass box for me feels a little underdeveloped, like it's not worthy, frankly, of connecting those two. It feels like it's almost not there, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
I think you guys heard that comment a little bit earlier, so I think that's the challenge. That's the challenge for you guys to work through. But
Sure.
yeah,
If I can have a parting observation about that, one of the reasons that we didn't go literally a traditional glass box there, this is a west-facing facade, and it will become a serious, interesting challenge dealing with afternoon daylight here and heat gain in a building that is actually trying to do its best to mitigate all those kind of conditions. And so the consequence of that may quickly lead to something that's not necessarily transparent. It becomes pretty, solid or sort of opaque or translucent in a way that may or may not be very satisfactory. But we hear and understand you can everything that you're observing here, and we could share many sketches that went through this, but this approach from a planning point of view, and we think even an urban design point of view, actually help sort of resolve a series of internal issues with the external one. But I completely agree that the front door needs to be, the statement needs to be clearer and more articulated. But we'll go at it.
Yeah, like it also allowed for the shared second floor terrace. I'm not, yeah, I do think it needs development. I'm just saying there was something really nice about that terrace to be able to occupy that building, for some months of the year outside and open it up. So we have to figure out, we understand your comments. We don't disagree. It's just a matter of figuring out how can we make it the best possible.
all right. And with that, we'll look
Great.
for the best possible when it comes back to full commission.
Always the best, Mimi.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
commissioners,
Thank
for your
you.
time. Thank
Thank
you
you
to the
very much.
proponent
Good night.
team.
Thank
Yep.
you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.